What if I told you that the most powerful social networking tool on earth is just a mildly addictive psychoactive drug?
Right, yeah.
I mean, the foundational infrastructure of modern corporate life, the thing that arguably kicked off the historical Enlightenment.
No, absolutely.
It's all just extracted from a roasted fruit pit. And I know you, the listener, know exactly what I'm talking about here.
It's coffee, obviously.
Exactly, it's coffee. And we were looking at a huge stack of sources today for this deep dive, all centered around coffee. But we are completely abandoning the whole cliche of coffee just being that, that magical liquid that cures your morning sluggishness.
No, you'd have to move past that.
Right. Instead, the mission today is to look at the biological mechanisms of how it actually hijacks your brain. And, well, more importantly, how that biological hijacking has engineered this massive sociological phenomenon.
It is such a remarkable framing, I think, because it really forces us to look past the commodity aspect of it.
Yeah, the basic transaction.
Right. Because when you view coffee merely as a commercial product, like, you hand over $4, you receive a stimulant, you walk out the door, you completely miss the underlying architecture of modern society.
You really do.
The sources we are diving into today, they argue that mastering the culture of coffee, understanding the lexicon of the so-called third wave, and really knowing how to navigate the physical spaces where this consumption happens, it is fundamentally about mastering human connection.
Which is wild to think about. But to understand that human connection, we actually have to start with the biology.
Yes, the chemistry of it all.
Exactly. Because the reason we even gather in these physical spaces in the first place is driven by the very specific mechanics of caffeine. And I was reading through the research on how caffeine actually operates in the brain, and it completely shattered my preconceived notions.
Really? How so?
Well, I always thought caffeine gave you energy, like putting fuel in a car. But it doesn't do that at all.
No, not even a little bit. It's a masterclass in biological deception, honestly.
Yeah. That's such a good way to put it.
Yeah, because it doesn't give you anything. It simply blocks your ability to perceive what you lack.
Exactly. Wait, let me break down the mechanism for the listener because this is just fascinating. So, throughout the day, your brain produces this neurotransmitter called adenosine.
Right, adenosine.
And adenosine is basically, it's like your brain's internal hourglass. As it builds up over the course of the day, it binds to these specific adenosine receptors in your brain, and it slows down your neural activity.
It makes you feel sleepy?
Yeah, it makes you tired. It's the biological signal telling you to shut down, go to sleep, and rest. But caffeine is structurally, on a molecular level, almost an identical twin to adenosine.
Which is the trick. That's what allows it to act as an antagonist in the brain.
Right.
It basically sneaks into those exact same adenosine receptors and just docks right in there. Mm-hmm. But because it isn't actually adenosine, it doesn't trigger that slowing down effect.
It just sits there.
Exactly. It just sits there, blocking the doorway so the actual adenosine can't get in.
It's like it puts a blindfold on your exhaustion. The adenosine is still building up in your system, right? You're still getting more and more tired.
Oh, yeah, the fatigue is still there.
But your brain just can't feel it anymore. You aren't actually energized. You are just chemically incapable of feeling your own fatigue.
It's wild when you think about it that way.
It really is. So you have this massive global population walking around with artificially blocked fatigue receptors. And the need to facilitate this specific chemical transaction every morning, it has created an entirely unique physical environment, which is the cafe.
Yes, and the sociological term for this environment, which is central to our sources today, is the third place.
The third place. Let's unpack that.
So Ray Oldenburg, he's an urban sociologist. He actually coined the term third place back in the late 1980s.
Okay.
And to understand its value, we have to look at the first two places in a person's life. The first place is your home.
Right, where you live.
Yeah. It is private, it is intimate, but it's also heavily burdened with domestic duties, familial hierarchies, and, personal responsibilities. You have to do the dishes, take care of the kids, all of that.
Lots of pressure.
Exactly. Now, the second place is your workplace. And that environment is entirely transactional.
Because you're getting paid.
Right. It is defined by productivity, rigid corporate hierarchies, and very strict professional expectations.
So you have the first place, which demands domestic labor, and the second place, which demands professional labor.
Precisely. And so the third place is this communal sanctuary that exists entirely outside of those two spheres.
Like a neutral zone.
Exactly. It is the cafe, the local pub, maybe a community center. It is an environment where your presence is not tied to your productivity or your familial role at all.
You're just a person there.
Right. It is a space for ambient sociability. You can brainstorm, you can debate with someone, you can collaborate, or, you can just engage in the simple passive act of people watching without any expectation of actual output.
Okay, I hear you, but I am going to push back heavily on this, though.
Okay, go for it.
Because, reading Oldenburg's theories from the 1980s is great on paper, but let's look at the reality of a modern cafe today.
Fair enough.
If you walk into literally any high-end coffee shop right now, what do you actually see? You see 40 people, all wearing massive noise-canceling headphones, just staring dead-eyed into the glowing rectangles of their laptops.
That is a very accurate description, yes.
Right. Nobody is debating the Enlightenment in there. Nobody is collaborating with their neighbor. So is this really a sanctuary for social cohesion anymore? Or has the cafe just become this, decentralized, incredibly expensive second place? Like a remote office with a slightly better indie pop soundtrack.
That is the defining tension of modern urban life right there. You are entirely right that the physical space itself has been heavily co-opted by remote work.
Totally.
However, the sources argue that the sociological function of the third place hasn't actually vanished. It has just evolved into a linguistic tool.
A linguistic tool? What do you mean?
Well, even if the physical cafe is filled with silent people typing on laptops, the actual idea of the cafe remains the ultimate social lubricant. Consider the phrase, "let's grab a coffee." Or the even more corporate iteration, "let's touch base over coffee."
Oh man, let's touch base over coffee. Which I have to say always sounds like the most meaningless, hollow corporate jargon imaginable to me.
It really does.
It ranks right up there with, let's synergize and circle back, just completely empty words.
It definitely sounds hollow on the surface, but structurally, it is actually a piece of genius social engineering.
Really? How so?
Think about it. If you want to network with a prospective client, or maybe just reconnect with an old acquaintance, your options are severely limited by standard social norms.
Right.
Inviting them to your office boardroom is very high pressure, it's formal, and it implies a strict transactional agenda, like you want something from them.
Yeah, you don't invite someone to a boardroom just to chat.
Exactly. On the other hand, inviting them to your home is a severe boundary violation. It's entirely too intimate for a casual networking meeting.
Oh yeah, I am certainly not inviting a random LinkedIn connection to sit on my living room sofa. That is inherently creepy.
Right. So where do you go? You leverage the third place.
Yeah.
Let's grab a coffee provides this magically low-stakes pretext for a meeting. It was a bounded commitment.
A bounded commitment. I like that phrase.
Yeah, because you are implicitly agreeing to spend exactly the amount of time it takes to consume 6 to 12 ounces of a hot liquid. No more, no less.
Oh, that is so true.
If the conversation is terribly awkward, the moment the cup is empty, you have a completely socially acceptable exit strategy. You just say, well, I finished my coffee, I better get back to work.
It's the perfect escape hatch.
Exactly. But if the conversation is brilliant, you can easily extend the interaction by just saying, hey, let me grab us another round.
So the drink is literally nothing more than an alibi. You don't even need the adenosine blockers at that point. You just need the physical prop to justify occupying this neutral territory together.
You nailed it. The coffee is the medium. The connection is the actual message. By stripping away the formalities of the boardroom and the intimacy of the home, the cafe acts as this incredible catalyst for social cohesion. It just massively lowers the barrier to entry for basic human interaction.
Well, that actually makes the stakes of navigating the space feel a lot higher, doesn't it?
It does.
Because if the whole goal is social cohesion, the absolute last thing you want to do is stick out or look completely overwhelmed when you actually step up to the counter. And let's be honest, the modern specialty coffee menu is basically designed to induce panic.
It can be very intimidating, yes.
The sources talk extensively about this concept of decision fatigue, this psychological phenomenon where the sheer volume of choices just completely depletes your cognitive reserves. You walk into a cafe, you are already running on a blocked adenosine deficit because you're tired, and then you are confronted with a menu that looks like a biochemical engineering chart.
Yeah, decision fatigue is a massive hurdle in modern consumerism. Because every micro decision you make, from the origin of the bean to the exact temperature of the milk, it burns a tiny amount of glucose in your brain.
Just exhausting yourself before you even drink anything?
Precisely. So to avoid this, we really have to systematically deconstruct the menu from the ground up for our listeners. And that means starting with the absolute bedrock of modern cafe culture, which is the espresso.
Let's definitely get into the mechanics of this, because I think a lot of people, myself included for a long time, assume espresso is just like a darker roast of coffee.
That is a very common misconception.
But it has nothing to do with the roast at all, does it? It is entirely about the physics of the extraction.
Correct. Espresso is a brewing method, not a specific type of bean. And it is a method defined by incredibly violent, rapid extraction.
Violent extraction.
Yes. Think about standard drip coffee. Gravity just slowly pulls hot water through a bed of loose grounds over the course of several minutes. It's very gentle. Espresso, on the other hand, utilizes 9 bars of atmospheric pressure.
9 bars?
Yes. And to put that in perspective, 9 bars is roughly 130 pounds per square inch of pressure.
Wow. That is essentially the same pressure you would find inside a professional cyclist's tire, right?
Exactly.
But instead of a tire, that pressure is being forced through a tiny, densely compacted puck of finely ground coffee.
Exactly. And the water is forced through all of that in roughly 25 to 30 seconds, not minutes. Seconds.
That is fast.
Because of that immense pressure, the water acts as a solvent in a way that regular gravity simply cannot achieve. It violently rips out the soluble compounds, the sugars, and most importantly, the insoluble oils from the actual cellular structure of the coffee bean.
And those oils are what create the crema, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's that beautiful golden brown layer of foam that just kind of sits perfectly on top of the shot.
The crema is a really fascinating chemical reaction. You see, when the coffee is roasted, carbon dioxide gets trapped inside the cellular walls of the bean.
Okay.
When that incredibly high-pressure water hits the compacted grounds, it forces all that carbon dioxide out at once. The CO2 bubbles mix with the emulsified oils from the coffee, creating this delicate aromatic microfoam on top.
It's basically an emulsion.
It is, and it is the ultimate visual indicator of a properly extracted, freshly roasted espresso. Furthermore, because of this intensity, the drink is designed to be consumed swiftly. You do not nurse a 1-ounce shot of espresso for 45 minutes.
No, it'd be freezing cold. It is a culinary wake-up call. But let's say you love the flavor profile of that high-pressure extraction, but you don't want the experience to be over in 3 gulps.
Right, you want to linger.
Exactly. That brings us to the Americano. And this is where the history completely fascinated me, because mechanically, an Americano is essentially just a shot of espresso diluted with hot water.
Yep, that's all it is.
But the origins go back to the European theater of World War II, don't they?
They do. The history of the Cafe Americano is this perfect example of a major cultural collision. So American soldiers stationed in Italy during the Second World War were accustomed to a very specific type of coffee.
Right.
They were used to the American diner-style drip coffee. You know, a large volume of liquid, heavily diluted, deeply mellow, something you could just sit and sip from a mug over a long period.
Right, the classic bottomless cup of diner coffee that you'd see in a movie.
Exactly. But when these GIs went into local Italian coffee bars, they were handed a traditional espresso.
Which is tiny.
Very tiny. And for a palate that is habituated to diluted drip coffee, a straight shot of Italian espresso is overwhelmingly aggressive.
I can imagine.
The concentration of bitter compounds and the intense acidity was just far too astringent for them. So to replicate the volume and the mellow profile of the coffee they missed from back home, the soldiers just asked the local baristas to pull the shot of espresso into a larger cup and fill the rest of it up with boiling water.
I love visualizing that specific moment. Just an American soldier staring at this tiny, aggressive thimble of dark liquid, sliding it back across the counter and saying, like, can you please just water this down for me?
Right.
And in doing so, inadvertently creating an absolute staple of the global menu.
It's amazing how those things happen.
But mechanistically, what is actually happening when you add that hot water? Like, why does it change the flavor so drastically if it's literally the exact same amount of coffee in the cup?
It alters the sensory perception of the aromatic compounds. By increasing the volume of the solvent, which is the water, you are spreading the dissolved solids over a much larger surface area.
Oh,
so it significantly reduces the perceived intensity of the bitter tannins and the sharp acids on your tongue. It stretches the flavor notes out, making them easier to identify individually without fundamentally changing the chemical makeup of the extraction. It prolongs the ritual, basically, without requiring the addition of milk.
Which brings us perfectly to the most complicated part of the menu, Yes, the moment we introduce dairy, we enter what I like to call the milk matrix.
The milk matrix, I like that.
This is where the decision fatigue really spikes for people. Because to the untrained eye, a latte, a cappuccino, and a flat white all look exactly the same.
They do.
It's just a cup of brown liquid with white foam on top. So let's break down the actual architectural differences here, starting with the latte.
The latte is definitely the most ubiquitous, approachable milk-based beverage globally. Structurally, it is heavily biased toward the dairy.
Okay.
You start with a single or double shot of espresso, and you combine it with a very large volume of steamed milk, typically around 8 to 10 ounces. Crucially, it is topped with only a very thin, delicate layer of what we call microfoam.
Let's talk about the physics of that steamed milk for a second, because steaming milk isn't just about making it hot, is it? You are actually fundamentally altering the chemical structure of the milk proteins.
Yes, you are denaturing the proteins. When a barista submerges that steam wand into a pitcher of cold milk, they are introducing two things simultaneously: intense heat and rapid vortex-like aeration.
Right, that loud tearing sound you hear.
Exactly. And the heat begins to unfold the whey proteins in the milk. As these protein strands unfold, they wrap themselves tightly around the tiny air bubbles being injected by the steam wand.
So they're essentially building little protein cages around the air.
Exactly. And these microscopic protein-encased air bubbles become suspended in the fats of the milk, creating this incredibly silky, dense texture known as microfoam. In a latte, the volume of this steamed milk is so high that it completely mellows out the espresso.
The coffee just becomes a background note.
Right. The drink is fundamentally about the comforting, sweet texture of the warm milk.
Now contrast that architecture with the cappuccino.
The cappuccino is a much more aggressive, coffee-forward structure. It is traditionally ruled by the law of thirds: 1/3 espresso, 1/3 steamed milk, and 1/3 thick, airy foam.
So a lot less liquid milk.
Exactly. Because there is significantly less liquid milk diluting the espresso shot, the coffee punches through the dairy much more forcefully.
And that top layer of foam is much thicker, almost like a thermal cap, keeping all the heat trapped inside the cup.
It acts exactly like an insulator, yes.
Now, the sources bring up an incredible cultural rule regarding the cappuccino, specifically in Italy. And if we are talking about using coffee as a tool for social cohesion, making sure you don't alienate the people around you is pretty key.
It is very important.
What is the strict Italian rule here?
If you are traveling in Italy, ordering cappuccino after 11 a.m. or noon is considered a severe social faux pas.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It is one of the quickest ways to instantly identify yourself as a tourist who just doesn't understand the local culinary philosophy.
Why, though? I mean, is it just gatekeeping? Like, oh, look at the silly Americans drinking milk at 3 p.m.?
No, it isn't just snobbery at all. It is deeply rooted in traditional Italian beliefs regarding digestion. In Italian food culture, milk is not considered a beverage. It is considered a heavy food.
Oh, I see.
It is essentially liquid fat and protein. The biochemical reality is that when heavy amounts of milk hit the stomach acids, the casein proteins coagulate, making it a very slow, heavy digestion process.
Okay, so a cappuccino is basically viewed as a meal in a cup.
Exactly. Therefore, it is strictly a morning ritual intended to jumpstart the metabolism, and it's usually paired with a light pastry. The idea of consuming a heavy cup of liquid dairy after a rich, multi-course lunch of pasta or meat, it is viewed as an assault on the digestive system.
Wow.
It completely contradicts their entire philosophy of how food should process through the body.
That makes total sense when you put it like that. I mean, you would need a bowl of heavy cream after a massive steak dinner.
Exactly.
So the cappuccino stays firmly in the morning. But what about the flat white? Because this drink seems to have absolutely conquered the global market in the last decade. Literally everyone offers a flat white now.
They do. The flat white is an invention of the Antipodes, so Australia and New Zealand. And it serves as the perfect compromise between the aggressive cappuccino and the diluted latte.
Oh.
Well, it is served in a much smaller vessel, usually around 5 to 6 ounces total. This means the ratio of coffee to milk is much higher, resulting in a prominent, strong espresso flavor.
But the real magic is in how they handle the milk, right?
Well, the milk texturing is paramount. A flat white does not have that thick, airy cap of foam like a cappuccino, nor is it mostly hot liquid like a latte. The barista steams the milk to create a remarkably dense, velvety microfoam, and then carefully folds that microfoam throughout the entire depth of the drink.
Throughout the whole cup.
Yes. Every single sip is a perfect homogeneous mixture of strong espresso and silky sweet milk texture.
It's a textural masterpiece, honestly. Now, everything we've talked about so far involves heat, but the sources highlight a massive paradigm shift in the menu, particularly driven by younger demographics, and that is cold brew.
Yes, the cold brew explosion.
And I want to get into the chemistry of this because I was totally under the impression that cold brew was just a marketing term for iced coffee.
A lot of people think that.
Right. Like you threw a pot of hot coffee, you put it in the fridge, you pour it over ice, and you charge an extra $2. But the extraction mechanism is entirely different.
It is a fundamentally different chemical process. What you described, brewing hot coffee and then chilling it, is traditional iced coffee. And it has a fatal flaw.
Which is?
Well, we talked earlier about how hot water is an incredibly violent solvent. When you brew coffee with hot water, you rapidly extract the sweet sugars and oils, but you also rapidly extract the bitter chlorogenic acids and harsh tannins.
Because hot water doesn't discriminate.
Exactly.
It just pulls everything out of the bean as fast as possible. I like to think of hot water extraction like a crowd of panicked people running out of a burning building.
Oh, I like that.
It's chaotic. Everyone is rushing out at the exact same time. The good compounds, the bitter compounds, the acids, they all just smash through the door at once. And if you take that chaotic mixture and throw it in the fridge, as it cools down, those bitter tannins become even more pronounced on the human palate.
Yes, cold temperatures actually highlight bitterness.
Which is exactly why traditional iced coffee often tastes incredibly harsh unless you completely drown it in liquid sugar.
That is a brilliant analogy, the burning building. Cold brew, however, completely removes the chaotic energy of heat from the equation. Instead of hot water, coarse coffee grounds are submerged in room temperature or cold water.
Okay.
And because there is no thermal energy to force the extraction, you have to rely entirely on time. The coffee steeps for anywhere from 12 to 24 hours.
So cold brew extraction is more like an orderly single-file line out of the building.
Precisely. And the crucial chemical difference is temperature-dependent solubility.
Meaning what?
Meaning many of those harsh, bitter chlorogenic acids and tannins that ruin hot coffee are only soluble at high temperatures. Cold water simply lacks the energy to dissolve them. They remain locked safely inside the cellular structure of the coffee grounds.
So the cold water only invites the most agreeable compounds to the party.
It slowly extracts the sugars, the chocolate notes, and the smooth flavor compounds, leaving the bitter acids behind. The result is a profoundly smooth, incredibly low acidity beverage that requires almost no sweetener to be palatable. It is an absolute triumph of patient chemistry over violent heat.
Okay, so we have scientifically decoded the menu.
We have.
We understand the espresso extraction, the milk matrix, and the thermodynamics of cold brew. But knowing what the drinks are is really only half the battle, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
If the cafe is our third place, our social sanctuary, we have to know how to actually speak the language of the sanctuary. And this brings us to the sociolinguistics of the modern order. Because when you step up to the counter, you aren't just reading off a list, you are participating in a highly specific cultural script.
The language of the modern cafe is entirely distinct from traditional retail or restaurant interactions.
Yeah.
If you walk into a fine dining establishment, the language is formal, deferential, and highly structured.
Right, very proper.
In a cafe, however, native speakers and those fluent in the culture rely on aggressive casualness.
Aggressive casualness. I love that. Because it's true. If I walk up to a barista and say, greetings, I would like to purchase one iced flat white. Please, I sound like an undercover cop or robot.
You do.
It completely breaks the social contract of the space. The sources note that these transactions rely heavily on collaborative phrasal verbs.
Yes. The standard phrasing you hear is rarely, I will order. It is almost always, I'll go for, or let's do. For example, a customer will step up and say, let's do an iced oat latte.
I use let's do all the time without even thinking about it. But when you really unpack it, let's is a contraction of let us. You are actively including the barista in your order.
Exactly. You are framing a simple commercial transaction as a shared project. You are co-creating the beverage together.
Wow.
This linguistic shift from a master-servant dynamic where you command the worker to fetch your goods to a collaborative dynamic is central to the illusion of the third place. It reinforces the idea that we are all equals occupying a communal space, even though, money is changing hands.
And the barista is playing the exact same linguistic game, too. The sources point out this specific phrase that has basically taken over the service industry. What can I get going for you today?
The addition of the word going is a vital psychological marker. A barista could just ask, what do you want?
Right, which sounds a bit rude.
But what can I get going for you implies a sense of shared momentum. It acknowledges the fast-paced, high-stress reality of a morning rush, but frames it as an energetic, positive action. The machinery is already moving, the process is alive, and the barista is just inviting you to jump onto this moving train of productivity.
But once you jump on that train, the level of customization you are expected to articulate is mind-boggling.
It is intense.
You aren't just ordering coffee anymore, you are ordering a hyper-specific, individualized biochemical cocktail. Decaf, half calf, extra shot, sugar-free vanilla, and then this absolute explosion of the milk alternative matrix.
Right.
Whole, skim, oat, almond, macadamia, soy. It's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, but it serves a vital sociological function. This hyper-customization is not just about flavor preference. It is about status signaling and identity construction.
Status signaling.
Yes. In the mid-20th century, coffee was a mass-produced, uniform commodity. Everyone drank the exact same Folgers out of a tin can. Today, your coffee order is a broadcast of your socioeconomic and ethical identity.
Let's talk about the oat milk phenomenon specifically, because I think it proves your point perfectly. Oat milk didn't take over cafes just because people suddenly became lactose intolerant en masse overnight.
Not at all. The rise of oat milk, and specifically premium brands of oat milk in high-end cafes, functions as a clear class signifier.
How so? Walk me through that.
Well, dairy milk is heavily subsidized by the government and very cheap. Opting for a plant-based alternative usually incurs a surcharge, an extra $1 or more per drink.
Right, the dreaded upcharge.
By casually ordering oat milk, you are subconsciously signaling disposable income. Furthermore, you are signaling a specific set of ethical values, an awareness of the environmental impact of industrial dairy farming, a concern for animal welfare, and an alignment with modern wellness trends.
So you aren't just paying an extra $1 for the taste of oats. You are paying $1 to broadcast to the barista and really anyone within earshot that you are environmentally conscious, health aware, and wealthy enough to not care about the upcharge. Your order is basically your personal brand.
Exactly. The cafe menu has evolved into a highly nuanced socioeconomic sorting mechanism.
Okay, so we've navigated the sociolinguistic minefield. We co-created our socially signaling oat milk flat white with the barista, and we finally have the drink in our hand. Now we have to transition from the language of ordering to the language of tasting.
Right, the sensory evaluation.
If we really want to understand the third wave of coffee, the artisanal aspect, we have to evaluate the drink like a professional, and the sources introduce this concept of the Q grader.
A Q grader is the absolute pinnacle of coffee evaluation. They're basically the master sommeliers of the coffee world.
Wow.
Earning a Q grader certification requires passing extremely rigorous sensory exams, identifying microscopic defects in unroasted beans, and demonstrating an elite ability to isolate specific aromatic compounds blindly.
So if a Q grader takes a sip of coffee, they aren't just saying, oh, wow, this is strong or this tastes bitter. They are looking for highly specific structural elements.
Yes.
And the first element that completely confused me when I was reading the sources was the concept of acidity.
Yes. Acidity is perhaps the most misunderstood term in the layperson's coffee lexicon.
Right, because when I hear acidity, my brain immediately goes to a negative place. I think of battery acid or stomach acid. I think of milk that has been left in the sun and has gone rancid. But in the coffee world, acidity is actually a highly prized characteristic.
It is. The confusion stems from the difference between actual pH levels and sensory perception. All coffee is technically acidic on the pH scale.
Yeah.
But when a Q grader talks about acidity, they are not talking about a harsh sour defect. They are referring to a bright, lively, tangy quality within the cup. It is often driven by the presence of malic acid, which is the acid found in green apples, or citric acid.
Okay, so if we use a culinary analogy here, imagine you are eating a really heavy, rich piece of grilled salmon.
Oh, yeah?
If you just eat it plain, the fats can feel overwhelmingly heavy and kind of flat on your palate. But if you take a wedge of fresh lemon and squeeze it over the fish, the lemon juice doesn't make the fish taste sour in a bad way.
No, not at all.
The citric acid cuts through the fat, it lifts the flavors, and it makes the entire dish vibrant and dynamic. Acidity in coffee is basically that squeeze of lemon. It's the spark that makes the flavor notes pop.
That is an excellent analogy, because without that bright, acidic spark, a coffee will taste completely flat, muddy, and dull.
Okay, that makes sense.
The next major structural element a Q grader analyzes is the body, or what they often call the mouth feel.
And this has absolutely nothing to do with taste, right? This is entirely about tactile sensation.
Correct. This is about how the physical liquid actually interacts with the nerve endings on your tongue and the roof of your mouth. The mouthfeel is dictated by the amount of insoluble solids and oils suspended in the liquid.
How does brewing method affect that?
Well, a coffee brewed through a thick paper filter will catch those oils, resulting in a light, delicate body similar to the texture of a black tea.
Okay.
Conversely, a coffee brewed in a French press, which uses a metal mesh screen, allows all those heavy oils to pass through. That results in a thick, syrupy, heavy mouthfeel that really coats the palate.
But the ultimate dictator of both the acidity and the mouthfeel, the thing that locks all these flavors into place, is the roasting process. And I want to get into the chemistry of the roast, because there is a massive misconception out there about dark roasts versus light roasts.
Oh, huge misconceptions.
The sources highlight that the roasting profile is basically a battle between the origin of the bean and the flavor of the fire.
The roasting process is a violent, transformative chemical event. When a coffee bean is harvested, it is green, dense, and smells vaguely like fresh grass. It contains almost no recognizable coffee flavor whatsoever.
None.
None. The flavor is created entirely through the application of heat, primarily through the Maillard reaction.
The Maillard reaction, that's the exact same chemical process that browns a steak on a grill or turns bread dough into a golden crust, right?
Exactly. It is a highly complex reaction between amino acids and reducing sugars under heat, which creates hundreds of new flavor compounds. During a roast, as the temperature climbs past 380 degrees Fahrenheit, the water inside the bean turns to steam.
Okay.
The pressure builds inside until the cellular structure of the bean literally fractures. This is an actual audible pop known as first crack.
So it's essentially popping like popcorn.
It's exactly like popcorn. Now, if a roaster stops the process shortly after this first crack happens, they have created a light roast. The goal of a light roast is preservation. The heat was applied just long enough to make the bean soluble in water, but not long enough to destroy its inherent chemical identity.
So a light roast acts as a window into the terroir, the specific soil, altitude, and climate where the coffee was actually grown. If a bean from Ethiopia naturally contains bright, floral, blueberry notes, a light roast protects those delicate compounds.
Precisely. It respects the farm. But if the roaster leaves the beans in the drum longer, pushing the temperature past 430 degrees Fahrenheit, they enter the realm of the dark roast. And this is where the chemistry fundamentally shifts.
What happens to those delicate floral notes at 430 degrees?
They're completely incinerated. The intense heat destroys the complex, origin-specific acids. The sugars inside the bean undergo massive caramelization and eventually carbonization.
They just burn.
Yes. The cellular structure breaks down even further, forcing the heavy oils to the surface of the bean, which is what gives dark roasts that shiny, slick appearance.
So there is a massive trade-off here. I'll borrow a cooking analogy again. It's the difference between taking a piece of delicate white fish and gently steaming it with some herbs to really taste the ocean, versus taking that same fish, coating it in heavy spices, and blackening it on a cast iron skillet until it's charred.
Right.
With the blackened fish, you are no longer tasting the ocean. You are tasting the fire, the char, and the smoke.
That is exactly what happens with a dark roast. The flavor of the specific farm or region is masked entirely by the flavor of the roasting process itself. You are tasting the roast, not the bean.
Which makes sense.
And that is exactly why third-wave specialty cafes overwhelmingly favor light to medium roasts. They want to showcase the agricultural product, not the industrial process.
We have gone incredibly deep into the modern, hyper-customized third-wave cafe experience here. We understand the chemistry, the linguistics, and the roasting mechanics, but I want to zoom out significantly now.
Let's do it.
Because this entire culture we just dissected, the oat milk, the Q graders, the light roasts, this is just one tiny, highly privileged sliver of how humanity consumes coffee. Let's look at the global paradigms outlined in the sources. Let's start by contrasting the American paradigm with the traditional Italian paradigm, because they represent two fundamentally opposing views on how time should be spent.
The American paradigm, heavily shaped by the post-war economic boom and the rise of the automobile, is defined by convenience and continuous motion.
Right.
The ultimate symbol of this is the drive-through window and the oversized insulated paper cup.
It's coffee designed to fit perfectly into the cup holder of a Ford F-150.
Yes. The American approach views coffee primarily as fuel to facilitate multitasking. You are rarely just sitting and drinking the coffee. You are drinking it while driving, while answering emails, while walking down the street. It is purely an accessory to productivity.
Contrast that with Italy. We
Yeah.
discussed the cappuccino rule earlier, but how do they actually interact with their espresso daily? Because you don't really see people walking down the streets of Rome clutching massive paper cups.
You do not. The Italian paradigm is highly utilitarian, but it profoundly respects the sanctity of the ritual. In a traditional Italian bar, coffee is not a companion to another activity. It is the sole focus of the moment.
Okay.
You order your espresso and you consume it standing directly at the bancone at the counter.
So it's a pit stop, you don't take it to a table, and you certainly don't take it to your car.
It is an immediate, intense, stationary ritual. The espresso is served at a temperature meant to be consumed in 3 quick sips. You ingest the caffeine, you exchange exactly 2 sentences of pleasantries with the barista, and you leave.
In and out.
The entire transaction takes less than 3 minutes. But for those 3 minutes, you are entirely present. Furthermore, the Italian paradigm treats espresso as an egalitarian right, not a luxury good.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, the price of an espresso consumed standing at the counter is historically heavily regulated, either by custom or by local municipalities, to ensure it remains affordable for the working class.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It is considered a civic right to have access to that daily jolt, untethered from the premium pricing we see in American specialty cafes.
That is a brilliant distinction. The American model views it as a premium accessory for productivity, while the Italian model views it as a rapid democratic civic right. Now, if we travel further east, we encounter a tradition that completely rejects everything we just learned about extraction and filtration. Let's dive into Turkey and the broader Middle East.
The Middle Eastern paradigm is one of the oldest continuing traditions in the world, and it completely subverts Western obsessions with achieving a clean cup of coffee.
Clean meaning no grounds.
Right. In the West, we spend massive amounts of money on paper filters and metal screens to ensure no coffee grounds end up in the final beverage. Turkish coffee, however, completely embraces the grounds.
How is the extraction physically different?
It begins with the grind size. The coffee beans are pulverized into an ultra-fine powder, significantly finer than even espresso. It is almost the consistency of powdered sugar or talcum powder.
And instead of forcing high-pressure water through a puck like an espresso, they use a completely different thermal dynamic, don't they?
They use a traditional long-handled copper or brass pot called a cafés. The ultrafine coffee powder, cold water, and typically sugar are all combined in the cafés.
Okay.
The pot is then slowly heated, but traditionally it is heated not over an open flame, but by burying the bottom of the pot in a pan of deep, incredibly hot sand.
Why sand? What does that do mechanically?
Sand provides an incredibly even, gentle, ambient heat distribution, unlike the harsh, localized heat of an open flame. It allows the brewer to perfectly control the extraction.
Ah.
As the mixture heats, a thick, dark foam naturally rises to the top. Just before it boils over, it is swiftly removed from the heat, and this process is often repeated several times to build up that foam.
And when it's time to serve, there is no filter involved at all.
None. The entire contents of the sieve are poured directly into small cups. You must wait a minute or two for the ultrafine grounds to naturally settle to the bottom. The resulting liquid you sip is incredibly potent, thick, syrupy, and heavily textured.
It sounds delicious.
But the most fascinating aspect of this tradition actually happens after you finish drinking.
Yes, the mud at the bottom of the cup, the residual sludge. The sources describe a very esoteric practice attached to this called tasseography. Break that down for us.
Tasseography is the ancient practice of divination or fortune-telling through the interpretation of patterns. Once the drinker has consumed the liquid, they place the saucer over the cup, make a wish, and swiftly invert the cup.
So you literally flip it upside down, allowing that thick sludge of coffee grounds to slowly slide down the interior walls of the cup.
Exactly. As the grounds cool and dry, they form intricate, abstract shapes and patterns on the white porcelain. A designated fortune teller, or often just a wise elder within the family or community, will then read the cup.
Read the cup.
Yes, they interpret these shapes to predict the drinker's future, identify looming challenges, or offer insights into their personal life.
That is just phenomenal. The coffee is not just a biological stimulant, and it's not just a casual social pretext like touching base. It literally transforms into a mystical bridge to the future.
It does.
It serves a deeply psychological function. The person reading the cup is basically acting as a community therapist, using the coffee grounds as a projective psychological test to help people talk about their anxieties and hopes. It's brilliant.
It is a profound integration of the beverage into the spiritual and psychological fabric of the community. But to find the absolute purest, most ancient root of coffee as a tool for communal bonding, we really have to travel to the geographical and ancestral cradle of the coffee plant itself, which is Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is where the entire human relationship with this plant began. And the sources describe an Ethiopian coffee consumption paradigm that honestly makes our Western third-wave artisanal obsession look incredibly impatient and shallow. Take us through the Ethiopian coffee ceremony.
In Ethiopia, coffee is not a beverage you consume in isolation. It is not an accessory for your commute. It is a sacrosanct, deeply ceremonial gesture of hospitality, respect, and communal anchoring.
Wow.
The ritual is performed daily, often multiple times a day, and it is a multisensory process that takes hours to complete.
Hours. Compare that to the 3-minute Italian pit stop. How does the ceremony even begin?
It begins with the raw agricultural product. The host, usually the matriarch of the household, washes raw green coffee beans. She then roasts them right in front of the guests, typically in a flat iron pan over an open charcoal brazier.
So the guests are physically present for the Maillard reaction?
They are.
They watch the beans change color, they hear the first crack, and they smell the massive release of aromatic compounds as the smoke fills the room. They're entirely part of the transformation.
Exactly. Once the beans are roasted to a dark, oily sheen, they are not put into an electric burr grinder. They are ground entirely by hand, using a heavy wooden mortar and pestle.
That must take effort.
It does. And the rhythm of the pounding is a recognizable auditory signal to the whole neighborhood that this ceremony is underway.
It's basically an acoustic invitation. And how is it brewed?
The coarse grounds are placed into a traditional spherical black clay pot with a long, elegant neck known as the jabina. Boiling water is added, and it is brewed directly over the coals.
Okay.
The brewing process is highly precise, and the coffee is eventually poured into small, handless cups in a single unbroken stream from a height.
But the ceremony isn't just drinking one cup, is it? It's structured in very specific phases.
It is strictly structured into 3 sequential rounds of consumption. The first round is called able. Yes, it is the strongest, most potent, and most highly concentrated brew. This is when the most serious conversation in community business is discussed.
The heavy stuff.
Right. The second round is called tona. Water is added to the same grounds in the jabina and reboiled. This brew is naturally weaker, more mellow, and the conversation shifts to lighter, more casual topics.
And the third round?
The third round is called baraka, which literally translates to be blessed. It's the weakest extraction, almost just coffee-flavored water, but it is the most spiritually significant.
Wow.
Consuming the baraka signifies a blessing upon the guests and the household. It brings the multi-hour ritual to a graceful close.
It is a forced mechanism for prolonged human connection. I mean, you cannot rush the jabina. You cannot take the able to go in a paper cup.
No, you cannot.
To refuse a round or to leave early would be a massive breach of the social contract. It forces you to sit, to converse, and to actually bond. It is the ultimate expression of the third place, but it exists right inside the home.
It really is.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground today. We have journeyed from the molecular mechanism of adenosine blockers in our brain through the fluid dynamics of a 9-bar espresso extraction into the sociolinguistic minefield of ordering oat milk, and finally through the ancient sands of Turkish divination and the clay pots of Ethiopia. Let's consolidate the core insights we've extracted from these sources.
The overarching thesis, I think, is that coffee is never just coffee.
Right.
It is an incredibly accurate mirror for the society that consumes it. If you want to understand a culture's relationship with time, with status, with community, and with spirituality, look at how they prepare this specific bean.
Absolutely. We saw the American obsession with hyper-individualized efficiency, co-creating an iced oat flat white to fit our exact dietary identities while rushing to work. We saw the Italian insistence on rapid, egalitarian, stationary consumption at the balcone. The mystical, unfiltered psychological therapy of the Middle Eastern sezve, and the profound, inescapable hospitality of the Ethiopian 3-round ceremony. We learned to think like Q graders, rejecting the idea of battery acid and instead seeking out the bright, citric spark of a light roast that protects the terroir of the farm.
and we unpack the vital sociological tools that listeners really must recognize in their daily lives.
Right, practical stuff.
Understanding the true biological illusion of being caffeine-fueled, recognizing the cognitive drain of decision fatigue when confronted with the milk matrix, and, most importantly, recognizing the structural genius of the third place.
That is the ultimate takeaway for me. The realization that asking a colleague or an acquaintance to grab a coffee is not meaningless corporate jargon at all.
It's essential.
It is the most powerful, low-stakes, bounded commitment we possess to foster human connection outside the rigid hierarchies of the office and the intimate boundaries of the home. It is quite literally the architecture of our social lives.
Which leads us to a deeply fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling thought experiment to leave the listener with today.
Oh, I'm ready.
We have spent this entire deep dive establishing a direct chain of causality. The biological effect of caffeine, its unique ability to block adenosine, created a massive global demand.
Right.
That demand required physical spaces for distribution. Those physical spaces eventually evolved into the third place, the sanctuary of modern social cohesion and networking.
The biological drug literally built the physical infrastructure of our social lives.
Precisely. But what happens if that foundational biological drive is suddenly removed? Well, we are entering an era of rapid technological and neurobiological advancement. Imagine a near future where humanity discovers a different, vastly superior method for managing fatigue.
Okay.
Perhaps it is a new class of synthetic non-caffeinated nootropics. Perhaps it is a targeted digital pulse or a neural implant that perfectly regulates our adenosine receptors without the need for a roasted fruit pit at all.
Oh, wow. If we can bypass the biological need for the liquid stimulant entirely, what happens to the social infrastructure it built?
If the biological necessity of the coffee bean disappears, does the physical third place even survive?
That is wild to think about.
Would the cafe, our sanctuary of ambient sociability, just completely collapse without the chemical pretext anchoring it? If we don't need the caffeine, do we lose the universally accepted excuse to touch base? Or would we simply invent a new ritual, a new alibi, to justify gathering in a room together?
That is a haunting question. If the biological drive vanishes, are we just left isolated, trapped forever between the demands of the home and the transactional reality of the office, with nowhere neutral left to go? That is a profound concept for you, the listener, to mull over on your own. Tomorrow morning, when you're standing in line, fighting off decision fatigue and waiting for your adenosine receptors to be chemically blocked, look around the room. Look at the people with the headphones, the baristas co-creating the beverages, the people touching base in the corner. Ask yourself, are we all really here for the drink? Or are we desperately clinging to the space the drink provides?
It's definitely something to think about.
Keep refining your knowledge, keep challenging your assumptions about the mundane rituals in your life, and above all, truly savor the complex chemistry of your next cup. It might just be the only thing holding the social fabric of society together.